What if destiny was not a straight line, but a path constantly rewritten by mercy? What if history's greatest moments were not driven by power, but by compassion in the face of cruelty? Long before the modern world learned the language of human rights, long before freedom became a slogan, there was a man whose life proved that mercy could shape destiny itself. The world he was born into did not believe in mercy. 7th century Arabia was harsh, tribal, and unforgiving. Survival depended on bloodline. Honor was inherited. The weak were disposable. Newborn girls were buried in the sand, their cries silenced by fathers who feared shame more than God. Slaves were treated as tools, bought, sold, and broken without consequence. The strong ruled, and the powerless endured. In the middle of this world, in the city of Mecca, a child was born whose destiny would change the course of human history. But his life began not with celebration, it began with loss. His father died before he was born. His mother would follow a few years later. By the time he could understand the meaning of safety, it had already been taken from him. Orphaned in a society that despised weakness, Muhammad grew up knowing hunger, silence, and absence. Yet something about him was different. He did not lie. He did not cheat. He did not bow to idols carved by human hands. While others chased wealth and status, he watched, listened, and reflected. They called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy, long before they ever believed his message. As he grew older, Mecca grew richer and crueler. The Kaaba, once built for the worship of one God, was surrounded by idols, each one representing profit for the elite. Religion had become business, faith had become currency. Muhammad felt the weight of this corruption. He retreated often, away from the noise of the city, away from its injustice, seeking answers in solitude. Then, one night, in a cave carved into a mountain, destiny spoke. Not as philosophy, not as metaphor, but as command. Read. The man who could not read trembled. I am not one who reads. The command came again, crushing and inescapable, and with it came words that would echo across centuries, words that would challenge empires, kings, and ideologies. Read in the name of your Lord who created. Muhammad fled the cave, terrified, his heart racing with a fear deeper than death itself. He did not believe he was chosen. He feared he was broken. It was mercy that met him first. His wife, Khadija, listened without doubt, wrapped him in warmth when the world felt unbearable, and believed in him before anyone else dared. That belief would cost her everything. When Muhammad began calling people to worship one God, Mecca did not respond with debate. It responded with violence. Mockery turned into torture. Isolation turned into starvation. Slaves like Bilal were dragged under the burning sun, a rock crushing his chest as his only response shook the foundations of oppression. Families were split. Children were disowned. The early Muslims were exiled into a barren valley, cut off from food and trade, listening to their children cry from hunger at night. This was not a story of instant victory. It was a story of endurance. Muhammad lost Khadija, the love of his life, his comfort, his shield. He lost his uncle Abu Talib, the man who protected him from assassination. The year would be remembered as the year of sorrow. Yet destiny did not harden his heart. When he traveled to the city of Taif seeking refuge, its people answered him with stones. Blood soaked his sandals. An angel appeared, offering justice through destruction. Muhammad looked at the people who had tried to kill him and chose mercy over revenge. Perhaps, he said, from their descendants will come those who worship God alone. History had never heard leadership like this before. Years later, forced to flee his home, Muhammad migrated to Medina, not as a conqueror, but as a peacemaker. There he built a society where race did not define worth, where faith united former enemies, where justice applied equally to the powerful and the poor. When Mecca finally fell into his hands, the city that had tortured and expelled him stood silent, waiting. 10,000 followers entered behind him. Everyone expected blood. Instead, Muhammad bowed his head in humility and declared, "Today there is no blame upon you. You are free." Destiny had come full circle, not through vengeance, but through mercy. And when he died, the man who reshaped civilization left behind no wealth, no throne, no empire, only a message that mercy is not weakness, that destiny is not blind, and that history is changed not by those who dominate, but by those who forgive. The people of Mecca stood frozen as the idols fell one by one, crashing into the dust that had once been sacred to false gods. For generations, those statues had defined power, wealth, and identity. Now they lay broken at the feet of a man who had every reason to seek revenge, yet chose mercy instead. This moment did not erase the pain of the past. It did not bring back the lives lost, the years stolen, or the scars carried silently by the believers, but it rewrote destiny in a way history had never seen before. For the first time, conquest arrived without cruelty, and the world would never be the same again. After the conquest of Mecca, people entered Islam in waves, not because they were forced, there was no compulsion, but because they witnessed something extraordinary. They saw a leader who forgave those who plotted his death, who elevated former slaves to positions of honor, who stood shoulder to shoulder with the poor, and who lived exactly as he preached. Among those watching closely were men who had once sworn to destroy him. Khalid ibn al-Walid, a brilliant military commander who had caused devastating losses to the Muslims in earlier battles, stood at a crossroads. He had fought Islam with strategy and force, convinced that destiny favored strength alone, but now he saw something that shattered his worldview. Mercy had won where swords could not. Khalid embraced Islam not as a defeated enemy, but as a transformed soul. Destiny redirected him from an opponent of faith into one of its greatest defenders. He would later be known as the Sword of Allah, a title earned not through ego, but through submission. This pattern repeated itself again and again. Umar ibn al-Khattab, once feared for his temper and strength, had set out with the intention of killing Muhammad. Destiny intercepted him with a few verses of the Quran, recited by his own sister. Mercy cracked open a heart once sealed by pride. Umar would become one of the greatest leaders in history, ruling with justice so profound that even his enemies trusted his courts. Islam was not creating new humans, it was revealing the best versions of them. Yet Muhammad knew his mission was nearing completion. On his final pilgrimage, standing before tens of thousands of followers, he delivered words that still echo across centuries. He reminded them that no Arab was superior to a non-Arab, no white person superior to a black person, except by righteousness. He declared the sanctity of life, property, and dignity. He returned rights to women long denied by society. And then he asked a question that carried the weight of destiny itself. Have I conveyed the message? The crowd responded as one, yes. He raised his finger toward the sky. O Allah, bear witness. Not long after, illness overtook him. The strongest man the desert had ever known now struggled to stand. His body weakened, but his legacy stood unshaken. In his final moments, he did not speak of power or revenge. He spoke of prayer, of mercy, of returning what was entrusted. When he passed away, the community was shattered. Some refused to believe it. Umar himself stood in denial, sword drawn, declaring that Muhammad had not died. It was Abu Bakr,
soft-spoken, steadfast, who grounded the people with words that would define Islamic leadership forever. Whoever worshipped Muhammad, know that Muhammad has died, but whoever worships Allah, know that Allah is alive and never dies. Destiny moved forward. What followed was not perfection, but struggle, human, painful, real. The early Muslim community faced internal divisions, political upheaval, and brutal challenges. Yet through it all, the principle of mercy continued to guide the righteous among them. Under Umar's leadership, an empire expanded, but not unlike those before it. Conquered lands were not pillaged into oblivion. Religious minorities were protected. Churches and synagogues stood unharmed. Justice was not reserved for Muslims alone. When Umar entered Jerusalem, he refused to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, fearing future Muslims might misuse his act to justify taking it over. That single decision preserved a sacred Christian site for centuries. This was mercy shaping destiny on a civilizational scale. But history is not a straight ascent. As generations passed, power tempted men who forgot the lessons of humility. Political conflicts erupted. Blood was spilled by Muslims at the hands of Muslims. The very community built on mercy now wrestled with ambition and fear. And yet the core message endured. Centuries later, during the height of the Crusades, when Jerusalem once again fell, this time to a Muslim leader named Salahuddin, history held its breath. The Crusaders had massacred Muslims and Jews alike when they first captured the city. Revenge would have been easy, expected. Instead, Salahuddin chose mercy. Civilians were spared, prisoners were fed, ransoms were waived for the poor. Even his enemies recorded his compassion with astonishment. One Western chronicler wrote that he had shown a generosity rarely seen among conquerors. Mercy had crossed cultures. Destiny had echoed its pattern. And then came the age of colonization, industrial power, and global conflict. Muslim lands were carved up,
Resources extracted, identities fractured. Once again, many asked the ancient question, had destiny abandoned them? But Islam had never promised worldly dominance. It promised meaning, accountability, hope beyond the visible. In the darkest prisons, under foreign rule, scholars wrote Quranic commentary from memory. Enslaved Muslims whispered prayers that traveled farther than chains ever could. Mercy survived where power failed. Today, in a world obsessed with control, productivity, and winning at all costs, the story of Islam unsettles modern assumptions. Especially in places like the United States, where success is often measured by dominance, wealth, and individual triumph. Islam tells a different story. It says destiny is written, but not rigid. That prayer can bend what seems fixed, that repentance can erase what looks permanent, that mercy is not weakness, but divine alignment. It says the most powerful moments in history were not when empires rose, but when hearts softened. And it asks a question that refuses to fade with time. What if the greatest change in your life will not come from force, but from mercy? What if destiny is waiting, not for your strength, but for your surrender? The story does not end here, because mercy is still rewriting destiny, one soul at a time. In the centuries that followed, the world kept changing its masks, but the struggle between mercy and destiny remained the same. In Baghdad, once the jewel of human knowledge, libraries rose like monuments to the mind. Scholars debated philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and law under the same roofs where Quran was memorized by heart. For a moment in history, learning was an act of worship, and curiosity was not feared but honored. Muslim scholars preserved Greek texts that Europe had forgotten. Algebra was born not from ambition, but from the need to fairly distribute inheritance. Hospitals treated the poor for free, because healing was seen as a form of mercy.
Even prisoners of war were educated instead of executed. This was not utopia, it was effort. And then destiny turned again. The Mongols came like a storm without mercy. When they reached Baghdad, the rivers ran black with ink from books thrown into the water and red with blood from scholars who refused to flee. Civilization collapsed in days. To many, it looked like the end of Islam itself. But destiny does not always move forward. Sometimes it buries seeds. Among the ruins, survivors carried fragments, verses memorized, principles lived, values whispered to children in the dark. What could not be protected by walls was preserved in hearts. In Damascus, Cairo, Cordoba, and Timbuktu, the legacy quietly reassembled itself, not as empire, but as influence, not as domination, but as presence. And then, far from the centers of power, something remarkable happened. Islam spread not by armies, but by merchants, not by force, but by trust. In Southeast Asia, traders arrived with honesty so rare that entire communities converted without a single battle. In West Africa, kings accepted Islam after witnessing justice that did not bend to wealth. Even prisoners of war were educated instead of executed. This was not utopia, it was effort. And then destiny turned again. The Mongols came like a storm without mercy. When they reached Baghdad, the rivers ran black with ink from books thrown into the water and red with blood from scholars who refused to flee. Civilization collapsed in days. To many, it looked like the end of Islam itself. But destiny does not always move forward. Sometimes it buries seeds. Among the ruins, survivors carried fragments, verses memorized, principles lived, values whispered to children in the dark. What could not be protected by walls was preserved in hearts. In Damascus, Cairo, Cordoba, and Timbuktu, the legacy quietly reassembled itself, not as empire, but as influence, not as domination, but as presence. And then, far from the centers of power, something remarkable happened. Islam spread not by armies, but by merchants, not by force, but by trust. In Southeast Asia, traders arrived with honesty so rare that entire communities converted without a single battle. In West Africa, kings accepted Islam after witnessing justice that did not bend to wealth. Even Chinese, Muslims lived as minorities for centuries, retaining faith without rebellion. Destiny shifted not through conquest, but through character. This is the part of history rarely taught, because it does not fit the myth that power alone changes the world. In the Americas, centuries later, enslaved Africans were torn from their homes and forced across the ocean in chains. What history books often forget is that many of them were Muslim. They prayed in silence on plantation fields. They wrote Arabic verses on scraps of paper they were not meant to read. They fasted without permission. They remembered Allah when everything else was taken away. One man, known to history as Umar ibn Said, was captured in West Africa and enslaved in the United States. He wrote his autobiography in Arabic, beginning not with his own name, but with praise of God. Even under bondage, mercy shaped his destiny inwardly when outward freedom was denied. Islam survived where dignity was stripped away. And then came the modern age. Nations rose, nations fell. Wars were industrialized. Death became efficient. Muslims found themselves framed not as contributors to civilization, but as its threats. Centuries of nuance were flattened into headlines. Faith was reduced to fear. And yet, in American prisons, Islam became one of the fastest growing religions, not because of propaganda, but because men who had lost everything recognized truth when they encountered accountability, discipline, and mercy combined. Malcolm X was one of them, a man born into racial violence, shaped by anger, imprisoned by despair. He found Islam behind bars, first as resistance, then as surrender. When he stood on the plains of Arafat during Hajj, surrounded by believers of every color, something inside him broke open. He saw destiny differently. He returned to America transformed, not weaker, but clearer. His message shifted from rage to justice, from division to universal dignity. Mercy had redefined his path. His life was cut short, but his transformation still speaks. This pattern repeats endlessly. People come to Islam not when life is easy, but when the illusion of control collapses, when destiny feels cruel, when suffering demands meaning. Islam does not promise comfort, it promises truth. It says that suffering is not always punishment, that delay is not always denial, that hardship can be mercy wearing rough clothing. In the Quran, Joseph is betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned for a crime he did not commit, and only later realizes that every step was guiding him towards a destiny greater than he could imagine. What looked like abandonment was alignment. This idea unsettles modern minds because it demands patience in a culture addicted to speed, trust in a world obsessed with certainty, surrender in a system that worships control. For the American audience, raised on self-made narratives, Islam presents a radical alternative, that you are not the author of destiny, but you are responsible for how you walk towards it. That mercy is not something you wait to receive, it is something you are commanded to give. That forgiveness is not forgetting injustice, it is refusing to let it poison your soul. And this is where the story turns inward, because Islamic history is not only about prophets, empires, and wars. It is about ordinary people making extraordinary choices when no one is watching. A mother who buries her child and still says, "God knows." A man who loses his wealth and refuses to steal. A woman who chooses faith in a
World that mocks it. These are not headlines, but they are destiny. Islam teaches that on the day of judgment, the scales will not measure how powerful you were, but how merciful. A cup of water given to a dog, a kind word spoken in anger, a sin abandoned in private. These small acts outweigh mountains. History's loudest moments fade, but mercy echoes. And so the story continues, not in museums or monuments, but in lives unfolding right now. In a New York apartment where a woman whispers prayer for the first time. In a Texas prison where a man learns to bow instead of break. In a California mosque where a child memorizes words revealed 14 centuries ago and still alive. Destiny is not finished, because as long as mercy exists, history is still being written. Time moved forward, but the questions remain the same. Why does suffering choose some lives and spare others? Why do people who seek God still face loss, exile, and injustice? And if destiny is written, where does mercy enter the story? These questions were not theoretical to the Muslims of history. They were lived realities. In Andalusia, Muslim Spain once stood as a bridge between worlds. Jews, Christians, and Muslims studied under the same roofs. Streets were lit when most of Europe slept in darkness. Women owned property. Libraries outnumbered churches in some cities. Knowledge was not feared, it was celebrated. But prosperity breeds complacency. Internal division weakened what mercy had built. When Christian kingdoms pushed south, Andalusia fell piece by piece. Families who had lived together for centuries were torn apart. Mosques became churches. Arabic books were burned in public squares. For many Muslims, exile followed. They crossed seas with nothing but memory and prayer. Mothers taught children verses in whispers so they would not forget who they were. Fathers buried keys to homes they would never see again.
Was this destiny, or was this mercy, hidden and delayed? Centuries later, those same Andalusian Muslims would influence North Africa, the Ottoman world, and beyond, carrying science, architecture, poetry, and faith into new lands. What looked like an ending became a redistribution of light. History rarely announces its intentions. In the Ottoman courts, justice was written into law. Even the Sultan could be summoned before a judge. Non-Muslims governed their own affairs. When Spanish Jews were expelled in 1492, Ottoman ships rescued them, offering refuge when Christian Europe closed its doors. Mercy crossed religious lines. But power is always fragile. As empires aged, corruption followed. Reformers rose and were silenced. Colonization crept in under the language of civilization. Maps were redrawn in European offices by men who had never walked the land they divided. Muslim societies fractured. And then came the 20th century. World wars tore the globe apart. Millions died. Colonial powers withdrew, leaving behind borders designed for conflict. New nations struggled to define themselves. Some turned to nationalism, others to dictatorship. Many lost sight of the moral compass that once guided them. To outside observers, especially in the United States, Islam began to appear not as a source of mercy, but as a problem to be solved. Television reduced a civilization to
means your worth is not erased by failure, and your efforts are not wasted in obscurity. Islam teaches that a smile given sincerely is charity, that removing harm from a path is worship, that mercy shown to animals earns divine favor. Nothing is too small, nothing is unseen. This worldview reshapes destiny from a grand, unreachable concept into a series of manageable choices. What you say when provoked, what you do when no one is watching, what you forgive when remembering would be easier. These moments accumulate. Over time, they shape character. Character shapes community. Community shapes history. This is how Islam understands change, not as sudden revolution, but as sustained moral discipline. And this may be its most misunderstood contribution to the modern world. Islam does not promise paradise on earth, it promises guidance through it. It does not deny suffering, it denies meaninglessness. It does not eliminate fear, it teaches courage grounded in trust. As the world grows louder, faster, and more divided, the Islamic emphasis on mercy feels increasingly countercultural. Yet history suggests that what survives is not what shouts the loudest, but what endures the longest. 14 centuries later, the same words revealed in a cave are still recited by children who do not speak Arabic fluently, yet feel their weight. The same prayers whispered by the oppressed are still answered, sometimes with relief, sometimes with strength. Destiny continues to unfold, not as spectacle, but as pattern, and the pattern is clear. Whenever mercy is abandoned, collapse follows. Whenever mercy is restored, renewal begins. This is not theory, it is recorded, and it is ongoing. Because somewhere, right now, someone is choosing patience instead of retaliation. Someone is choosing honesty instead of profit. Someone is choosing faith instead of despair. History will not record their name, but destiny will. History is alive, unfolding, and guided by the quiet, persistent force of ethical action. The story is far from over. As we move further into the 21st century, the interplay of mercy and destiny continues to manifest in increasingly complex ways. In an era dominated by technology, social media, and rapid communication, acts of compassion can now resonate globally in moments rather than generations. A single viral campaign organized by a Muslim humanitarian group can provide immediate relief to thousands, demonstrating that mercy can scale to unprecedented levels and directly influence destinies worldwide. Yet the principle remains timeless. Mercy is most potent when it is deliberate and consistent, not performative. Consider the countless volunteers who work behind the scenes, feeding refugees, mentoring at-risk youth, or tutoring children in underserved neighborhoods. They rarely receive recognition, yet their actions ripple outward, shaping lives and community outcomes in ways statistics cannot fully capture. Each decision to act with kindness against a backdrop of indifference or hostility is an echo of the same moral principle that guided the Prophet Muhammad and generations of Muslims before him. In education, Islamic institutions across the globe integrate mercy into pedagogy. Children are taught not merely to memorize texts, but to embody principles of justice, patience, and empathy.
You were meant to be. This is why repentance plays such a central role. In Islam, repentance is not humiliation, it is liberation. A man who spent his life in crime is told that one sincere turn toward God can outweigh decades of harm, if followed by effort to change. This idea shocks modern moral systems that equate worth with resume and reputation. Islam dismantles that logic. It says your worst moment does not define you, nor does your best moment guarantee you. What defines you is direction. Are you moving toward mercy or away from it? This question haunted rulers and shepherds alike. There is a story recorded in Islamic tradition of a man who killed 99 people. By every standard, his destiny seemed sealed. Yet when he sought forgiveness sincerely and took a step toward change, he died along the way. Angels disputed his fate. God measured the distance of his heart's direction, and mercy claimed him. This story unsettles those who believe justice must always look like punishment. Islam insists justice is deeper than appearances. It balances accountability with hope, law with grace, discipline with compassion. Remove any one of these and the system collapses. This balance is what allowed Islam to survive the modern age, even as many predicted its disappearance. When secularism promised salvation through progress, Islam reminded people that technology does not cure loneliness. When capitalism promised happiness through consumption, Islam warned that desire has no finish line. When nationalism promised identity through borders, Islam insisted that human worth transcends geography. These ideas did not dominate headlines, but they anchored lives. In American cities, second- and third-generation Muslims struggled with belonging. Too foreign for one world, too religious for another. Some drifted away. Others doubled down without wisdom. Many wrestled quietly, negotiating faith and freedom. Islam does not deny this struggle, it names it. The Quran describes life itself as a test, not because God needs information, but because humans need clarity. Pressure reveals intention. Difficulty exposes priorities. Destiny unfolds under stress. And mercy determines whether stress hardens or refines. Those who responded to hardship with bitterness passed pain forward. Those who responded with patience interrupted cycles. This pattern appears in families, communities, nations. In post-conflict societies, truth commissions succeeded where revenge failed. In neighborhoods plagued by violence, mentorship saved more lives than punishment. In personal lives, forgiveness freed people long after justice had stalled. Islam does not romanticize suffering, it contextualizes it.
It says pain is not proof of God's absence. Sometimes it is proof of his attention, forcing growth where comfort would preserve stagnation. This is not easy theology. It is demanding. It asks believers to resist despair when prayers seem unanswered, to resist arrogance when success arrives, to resist hatred when injustice feels personal. It asks them to trust that God sees the unseen, the private sacrifices, the quiet endurance, the restrained anger. For an American audience accustomed to visible metrics, this invisible accounting system is unsettling, but it is also relieving, because
Aloud, this challenges the modern obsession with visibility. Islam teaches that being unseen does not mean being insignificant. God's scale is not calibrated to applause. This belief offers dignity to those who feel forgotten, to the immigrant working night shifts, to the single parent holding faith together quietly, to the person struggling privately with doubt and still choosing kindness. In Islam, none of this is wasted. Every hardship borne with patience, every mercy given without credit, every tear shed in sincerity is recorded. Destiny is not blind, it is precise. And yet, Islam never allows fatalism. Believers are commanded to act, to resist injustice, to feed the hungry, to speak truth, even if destiny is written. This tension between effort and surrender defines the faith. You tie your camel, then you trust God. You fight oppression, then you accept outcomes. You plan, then you submit. This balance saved communities from despair when empires collapsed, and it can save individuals drowning in anxiety today. Because Islam does not ask you to predict the future, it asks you to be faithful in the present, and this may be its most radical contribution to a restless world. In a culture terrified of uncertainty, Islam teaches peace with the unknown, not indifference, but trust. Trust that mercy given is never lost. Trust that injustice unanswered in this life is not forgotten. Trust that destiny, though hidden, is guided by wisdom beyond human sight. This trust does not remove pain, it gives pain meaning. And meaning is what allows people to endure, rebuild, and forgive without becoming hollow. The story, then, is not moving toward a dramatic ending, it is moving toward responsibility. Because history has shown again and again that the greatest shifts do not come from domination, but from moral clarity lived consistently over time. Empires crumble, ideologies expire, but mercy reshapes destiny quietly, patiently, relentlessly. And that is why this story has survived 14 centuries. Not because Muslims were flawless, but because the message they carried refused to die. A message that insists the door of mercy remains open, that destiny is not sealed until the final breath, that no matter how dark the moment, light is never irrelevant. And as long as one person chooses compassion over cruelty, faith over despair, humility over pride, history bends again, not loudly, not immediately, but inevitably. And now the story reaches the quietest yet most decisive space of all, the inner life. Because after centuries of battles, empires, migrations, and revolutions, Islam insists that the final battlefield has always been the human heart. History records wars, but destiny is shaped in silence. Islamic tradition tells of people whose names never entered books, yet whose choices redirected generations. A merchant who refused to cheat and changed an entire marketplace. A judge who ruled against his own family and restored faith in justice. A teacher who spent decades correcting children gently, producing leaders who carried mercy into power. These were not accidents, they were deliberate acts of submission.
Islam teaches that every soul is born knowing God, but life layers distractions over that knowing. Pride, fear, desire, trauma, all cloud the original clarity. Destiny, then, is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you
stood shoulder to shoulder with those demanding dignity, even when it endangered their own security. Others failed that test, choosing silence over sacrifice. Islamic history does not sanitize this. It records both courage and collapse, reminding believers that faith is not inherited, it is practiced. Destiny does not reward labels, it responds to choices. Islam teaches that even the Prophet himself was warned that lineage would not save anyone. His own daughter was told she must answer for herself. This shattered tribal logic 14 centuries ago, and it still unsettles modern identity politics. No race is protected, no nation is chosen, no history excuses injustice. Only mercy, justice, and humility endure. This ethic became painfully relevant in the age of refugees. Syrians fleeing bombed cities, Afghans carrying children across borders, Palestinians, Rohingya, Bosnians before them, all displaced, all reduced to statistics. Yet again, history repeated itself. Some Muslims closed doors out of fear, others opened homes out of faith. In Jordan, families took strangers into one-room apartments. In Turkey, shopkeepers fed refugees without asking names. In Europe and America, Muslim communities, often under suspicion themselves, organized aid for those with nothing. These acts did not stop wars, but they prevented souls from being crushed. Islam does not promise to fix the world overnight. It promises to preserve humanity while the world is broken. And this is where mercy becomes destiny's most powerful force. Because destiny, in Islam, is not merely about what happens to you, but what happens through you. A single act of compassion can redirect a life. A single refusal to dehumanize can interrupt cycles of violence. This is why the Quran repeatedly reminds believers that God is watching not just outcomes, but effort. That a whispered prayer in despair may outweigh loud achievements built on ego. This belief creates resilience. When Muslims fast during Ramadan, they rehearse hunger voluntarily so that involuntary hunger elsewhere never becomes invisible. When they give charity secretly, they train themselves to detach from recognition. When they pray at fixed times, they submit even when convenience resists. These practices are not rituals for control, they are disciplines of mercy. They produce people who can endure uncertainty without collapsing into nihilism. For the American audience, shaped by productivity and speed, this offers an unfamiliar kind of freedom. Islam does not measure your worth by output alone. It measures it by integrity under pressure. Did you remain honest when lying was easier? Did you forgive when revenge was justified? Did you trust God when plans failed? These moments define destiny more than success stories ever will. And history supports this. Many of Islam's most influential figures were not rulers. They were teachers, scholars, and quiet reformers. People like Imam Ahmad, who endured torture rather than compromise truth, or Imam al-Ghazali, who walked away from fame because his intention felt corrupted, or scholars who spent lifetimes teaching in obscurity, shaping generations without monuments. They did not dominate history, they nourished it. Their mercy was intellectual, spiritual, and deeply personal. Even today, their works guide millions who have never heard their names spoken.
Hope with responsibility. This balance is why Islamic civilization survived centuries of rise and collapse. Empires fell, borders shifted, languages changed, but the core remained. Prayer 5 times a day, no matter who ruled. Charity, even in poverty. Fasting, even in hardship. Mercy, even when wronged.
These rituals trained generations to see beyond immediate outcomes. They taught people to think in terms of eternity. For an American audience raised on results, this worldview feels foreign. Yet it answers a question many secretly carry. What if success is not what you achieve, but who you become? Islam answers without hesitation. You become someone who stands for justice, even against yourself. Someone who forgives, even when forgiveness costs pride. Someone who trusts that God sees what the world ignores. This trust changes behavior. It prevents desperation when plans fail. It prevents arrogance when success arrives. It anchors identity beyond race, wealth, or nation. This is why Islam spread across cultures without erasing them. It did not demand uniformity, it demanded submission to truth and compassion. In America today, converts come from every background: atheists, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, seekers with no label at all. They often describe the same moment, not emotional ecstasy, but relief. Relief at no longer pretending to control everything. Relief at being accountable to something higher than opinion. Relief at a God who defines himself first as merciful. This is not the Islam of politics, it is the Islam of conscience. And conscience is where destiny quietly turns. Because history is not only written by presidents and generals, it is written by millions of private decisions. How you treat your spouse, how you raise your children, how you respond to injustice when no one is watching. Islam insists these moments matter more than monuments. On the day of judgment, the Prophet taught, people will come with mountains of deeds, only to find them scattered like dust. Others will come with little, but find it heavy on the scale. Why? Because mercy weighed more than image. Intention outweighed appearance. This teaching dismantles the obsession with legacy. It shifts focus from being remembered by history to being recognized by God. And that recognition does not depend on era, culture, or power. It depends on how you navigated destiny with mercy. The story, then, is not ancient, it is unfolding. It unfolds every time someone resists hatred in a divided society, every time forgiveness interrupts revenge, every time faith restrains ego. And perhaps the most unsettling truth Islam offers the modern world is this: that destiny is not waiting at the end of your life, it is being written in every choice you make, especially the merciful ones. At this point, the story turns from history into a mirror, because once mercy and destiny stop being abstract ideas, they begin to interrogate the individual soul. Islam does not allow a believer to hide behind history's greatness. It does not permit pride in past empires or famous names. Instead, it asks a quieter, more dangerous question. What will you do when mercy costs you something? This question has followed Muslims through every age. In times of safety, mercy is easy. In times of fear, mercy becomes proof of faith. During the civil rights era in the United States, some Muslims
Continents and individual hearts. It is not finished. Because the moment someone chooses compassion over revenge, trust over despair, faith over fear, history bends, quietly, once again. And so the story moves closer to our own time, where history no longer feels distant or abstract, but painfully personal. In the aftermath of global terrorism and endless wars, Islam became a word heavy with suspicion in much of the Western world. Airports turned into interrogations, mosques into surveillance points, Muslim names into exclamations. For many Americans, Islam was no longer a faith, it was a headline. But history does not live in headlines, it lives in people. In small towns across the United States, Muslim doctors treated patients who feared them. Muslim firefighters ran into burning buildings owned by people who questioned their loyalty. Muslim soldiers died wearing the same uniform as those who doubted their faith. Mercy was not loud, but it was present. After September 11th, when anger filled the streets and revenge filled the air, many expected Muslims to retreat into silence or rage. Instead, mosques opened their doors, blood drives were organized, interfaith prayers were held. Parents taught their children not to hate those who hated them. Some could not understand this response, because mercy makes no sense to those who believe destiny is shaped only by force. Yet Islam teaches that every moment is watched, every intention weighed, that responding to evil with evil only multiplies darkness, that restraint, though costly, reshapes the future. This belief traces back to the earliest days of the faith, when the Prophet Muhammad was insulted daily by a neighbor who threw garbage at his door. He did not retaliate. When the garbage stopped one day, he went to check on the man, only to find him sick. His concern shook the man more than any punishment ever could. Mercy disarmed hostility. This same logic appears again and again throughout Islamic history. When scholars were imprisoned for refusing to endorse false theology, they forgave their jailers upon release. When invaders were captured, many were fed before being questioned. When famine struck, rulers who feared God emptied treasuries before raising taxes. These acts were not weakness, they were clarity. Islam insists that destiny is not merely about survival, but about standing before God with a clean conscience. And this is where the modern individual enters the story. Because in a world driven by algorithms, outrage, and instant judgment, Islam asks something radical. Slow down, reflect, choose restraint. It teaches that anger is not power, that patience is not passivity, that mercy is an active, disciplined choice. In American prisons today, men memorize Quran by fluorescent light. Some will never be released, some will die behind bars, yet they speak of peace for the first time in their lives. They say Islam did not free their bodies, but it freed their minds. They learned that destiny is not erased by mistakes, but redirected by repentance. That no matter how far one falls, the door of mercy remains open until the final breath. This idea terrifies and comforts at the same time, because it means no one is beyond redemption, and no one is beyond accountability. Islam does not allow despair, nor does it allow entitlement. It balances.
Images of chaos. Politics replaced nuance with fear. History was compressed into stereotypes. Yet quietly, something unexpected was happening. In American cities, people with no cultural connection to Islam were reading the Quran for themselves. Veterans traumatized by war, single mothers searching for discipline and dignity, college students questioning consumerism, prisoners confronting accountability. They did not come for power, they came for meaning. They found a God who described himself as the most merciful before anything else, a faith that demanded justice but insisted on compassion, a destiny that did not deny suffering but framed it within purpose. Islam did not tell them they were perfect, it told them they were responsible. This message resonated in a culture exhausted by extremes. In Islam, you are not saved by identity, you are not condemned by history, you are judged by intention, effort, and mercy. The Quran speaks directly to the broken-hearted, promising that God is closer than breath. It reminds humanity that no soul carries the burden of another, that despair itself is a sin, not because pain is forbidden, but because hope is sacred. This idea reshapes destiny at the individual level. A man addicted to violence learns restraint. A woman defined by trauma learns dignity. A family trapped in cycles of poverty learns discipline and charity side by side. These transformations do not make headlines, but they change futures. Islamic history teaches that God does not rush outcomes. He allows people to reveal who they are. Pharaoh is given time, so is Moses. Both walk toward destiny, one through arrogance, the other through surrender. The difference is mercy. Mercy softens the believer and exposes the tyrant. In every age, there are those who misuse Islam for power. History does not deny this, but it also records scholars who stood against rulers, martyrs who chose truth over safety, and ordinary people who lived quietly with integrity. Their stories are rarely taught, yet they are the backbone of the tradition. In Bosnia, during the 1990s, Muslims faced genocide in Europe again, this time televised. Families were slaughtered, mosques destroyed. The world debated definitions while people died. And yet, after the war, many survivors chose not revenge, but reconciliation, not forgetting, but rebuilding. Mercy did not erase trauma, but it prevented destiny from being chained to hatred. This choice astonished observers, because mercy is unexpected when pain is justified. Islam does not command mercy because people deserve it. It commands mercy because God does. And this is the central tension of the faith, to trust a destiny written by a God you cannot see, while choosing mercy in a world that rewards cruelty. This tension is not resolved, it is lived. For the American audience raised on control and certainty, Islam offers something uncomfortable yet profound. You are not promised success, you are promised meaning. You are not asked to conquer the world, you are asked to conquer yourself. You are not judged by outcomes, you are judged by effort and intention. Destiny is not a cage, it is a test, and mercy is the tool that determines how you walk through it. As long as humans wrestle with suffering, injustice, and hope, this story continues. It moves through centuries.
Intentional, consistent, and courageous acts of mercy. Societies flourish when mercy guides action. Individuals thrive when they act ethically despite adversity. History confirms that this principle endures across centuries. The narrative continues, unfolding in every act of patience, compassion, and ethical choice. Each moment offers an opportunity to influence the world, to redirect destinies, and to uphold the enduring Islamic legacy, a faith and civilization guided by mercy through centuries of challenge and triumph. As we move further into the present day, the enduring connection between mercy and destiny is vividly reflected in the lives of individuals navigating challenges, both personal and societal. In refugee camps across the Middle East, families who have lost everything demonstrate extraordinary resilience. Parents teach children to pray, share, and act with compassion despite scarcity and uncertainty. Every act of patience, every moment of selflessness preserves the moral fabric of the next generation. Mercy becomes not just a principle, but a lifeline, shaping destinies that could otherwise be consumed by trauma and despair. In the United States and Europe, Muslim communities actively cultivate mercy through social programs, interfaith initiatives, and volunteerism. Mentorship programs for at-risk youth, food drives for the homeless, and educational initiatives for marginalized populations illustrate that even small, consistent actions can redirect the trajectory of entire communities. These interventions demonstrate the timeless Islamic principle that consistent ethical behavior compounds to influence destiny on both personal and societal levels. Healthcare professionals continue to embody this principle, especially in underserved areas. Doctors and nurses who treat patients with dignity, empathy, and fairness help not only to heal physical ailments, but also to foster hope and resilience. Every compassionate interaction becomes part of a larger pattern, shaping the long-term destinies of individuals and families. Education remains another vital arena where mercy guides destiny.
Islamic schools and community centers teach children and young adults that ethical choices matter, that compassion and integrity can transform lives, and that even seemingly minor decisions contribute to larger social outcomes. Students who learn to navigate challenges with empathy and patience carry these lessons into adulthood, creating ripples that extend far beyond the classroom. The digital age has expanded the reach of mercy and its influence on destiny. Online education, virtual mentorship, and global humanitarian campaigns enable acts of compassion to transcend borders, shaping lives in regions where resources and guidance are scarce. A single initiative, such as providing access to education for refugee children or fundraising for medical care, can fundamentally alter individual trajectories and collectively influence societal outcomes. Historical patterns underscore this principle. From the scholars preserving knowledge in Andalusia and Baghdad to Sufi leaders nurturing communities across Africa and South Asia, mercy has consistently preserved civilizations and redirected the course of human history. Modern parallels, such as aid organizations operating in conflict zones,
Peer pressure and economic challenges, yet their decisions, whether to mentor, volunteer, forgive, or advocate for justice, carry consequences that ripple outward. Each deliberate act of compassion is a thread in the larger tapestry of destiny, influencing families, neighborhoods, and even future generations. Healthcare provides a profound illustration. Muslim doctors and nurses, often working in underserved areas or during crises, exercise mercy daily. By treating patients with fairness, comfort, and dignity, they shape destinies, not just by saving lives, but by instilling trust, hope, and resilience. Every interaction reinforces the principle that mercy transforms outcomes far beyond immediate perception. Similarly, educators around the world instill ethical and moral values alongside academic knowledge. Islamic schools, madrasas, and community centers teach that choices matter, that integrity and compassion have long-term consequences, and that each student carries the potential to influence the world. The consistent application of these principles shape community character and societal trajectories, proving that mercy in education is as powerful as mercy in governance or humanitarian work. In the digital era, technology amplifies the reach of mercy. Online platforms enable education, guidance, and humanitarian support to transcend geographic and political boundaries. A single online initiative, be it a lesson in ethics, a crowdfunding campaign for disaster relief, or mentorship programs, can change thousands of lives, proving that intentional acts of mercy continue to shape destiny in unprecedented ways. Historical examples reinforce this truth. From early Muslim scholars preserving knowledge under threat, to Sufi saints nurturing communities through compassion, to ordinary believers acting ethically under societal pressure, the principle remains unchanged. Consistent mercy sustains civilizations and redirects the course of history. Modern parallels, such as aid organizations operating in Syria, Yemen, or refugee camps worldwide, reflect the same enduring ethic. Personal transformation exemplifies the principle at the individual level. People encountering Islam later in life often experience profound change, learning to forgive, act ethically, and serve others. A recovered addict mentoring youth, a survivor of abuse guiding others, or a professional using ethical choices to influence society all exemplify how mercy reshapes destiny, personally and socially. Islam emphasizes that destiny is co-created. It is not determined solely by circumstance or external power. Each ethical decision, every restraint of anger, every act of service or charity contributes to the unfolding of individual and collective futures. This principle transcends time and geography, from the deserts of Arabia to Detroit's classrooms, from refugee camps to virtual communities connecting millions.
The story of Islam is not solely about conquest, scholarship, or political dominance. It is about the continuous influence of mercy on destiny, evident in ordinary people performing extraordinary acts, communities preserving justice and ethics under pressure, and generations striving to align daily action with divine guidance. Even in a world of uncertainty, conflict, and moral complexity, the principle is clear. Destiny is shaped by mercy.
That mercy, when intentionally applied, transcends borders and cultural barriers, shaping destiny on an unprecedented scale. Personal transformation also illustrates the power of mercy. Individuals who encounter faith later in life often undergo profound changes, learning to forgive, act ethically, and engage in service. A man overcoming addiction may dedicate himself to mentoring others. A woman who survived abuse may become a pillar of support for her community. Each transformed life represents a redirection of destiny, highlighting the tangible impact of mercy in shaping personal and collective futures. Historical patterns reinforce this truth. When rulers governed with justice and mercy, societies thrived. When oppression, cruelty, and injustice prevailed, civilizations declined. From the Sufi saints in North Africa and South Asia, to scholars preserving knowledge under threat in Andalusia and Baghdad, mercy has been the cornerstone of human resilience, enabling cultures to endure challenges and crises over centuries. Even in modern times, this principle persists. Muslim communities around the world organize responses to crises with meticulous attention to ethical conduct, ensuring that assistance reaches those most in need without discrimination. By prioritizing mercy, they not only alleviate immediate suffering, but also influence the long-term destiny of entire communities, demonstrating that ethical action can reshape history as powerfully as military conquest or political maneuvering. At its core, Islam teaches that destiny is not fixed. It is co-created through intention, action, and moral discipline. Every decision to act justly, every choice to exercise compassion, every restraint against anger or revenge contributes to shaping outcomes, both seen and unseen. This principle applies across centuries and continents, from the deserts of Arabia to the classrooms of Detroit, from refugee camps in the Middle East to digital communities connecting millions worldwide. Thus, the story of Islam is not merely about empires, scholars, or battles. It is about the continuous, unfolding influence of mercy on destiny. It is evident in ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of compassion, in communities preserving ethical conduct against adversity, and in generations learning to align daily actions with moral and spiritual principles. Even in a world marked by uncertainty, conflict, and moral ambiguity, the pattern is unmistakable. Destiny is shaped by consistent, intentional, and courageous acts of mercy. History, society, and personal lives alike are all affected, proving that mercy remains the most powerful instrument for directing the flow of human events. The narrative continues, unfolding in every compassionate action, patient intervention, and moral choice. Each moment represents an opportunity to influence the world, to redirect destinies, and to fulfill the enduring legacy of Islam, a civilization, a faith, and a people guided by mercy across centuries. As the story moves forward, the intimate link between mercy and destiny becomes increasingly clear in personal narratives, showing how ethical choices shape not only individual lives but entire communities. In cities across the United States, Europe, and Asia, Muslim youth navigate complex social landscapes. They encounter systemic biases, humanity. It directs the arcs of communities, preserves cultural and spiritual legacies, and ensures that even in times of oppression or uncertainty, the trajectory of destiny remains aligned with justice and compassion. This is the living history of Islam, a continuous unfolding story of mercy shaping destiny, evident in both grand societal outcomes and the intimate choices of individuals. It is visible in the thriving educational programs of today, the humanitarian responses to global crises, the personal transformations of believers, and the moral choices made quietly but consistently every day. Even in a world dominated by uncertainty, the principle remains unchanged. Destiny is not predetermined solely by external forces. It is shaped continuously by moral action, sustained effort, and compassionate choice. Mercy is the guiding principle, ensuring that history unfolds with justice, integrity, and human dignity intact. The story continues, unbroken through every act of patience, forgiveness, charity, and ethical action. Each moment is an opportunity to influence the world, to redirect destinies, and to align human life with divine purpose. As we continue, the story of mercy and destiny becomes even more profound when we examine the interplay between faith, adversity, and societal impact in today's world. In many urban communities across the United States and Europe, Muslim families face systemic challenges, discrimination, economic hardship, and cultural marginalization. Yet, through deliberate acts of mercy, these communities demonstrate resilience and shape the destiny of both their members and the broader society. A single teacher providing extra attention to a struggling student, a young adult mentoring peers to avoid gang involvement, or a family assisting neighbors despite limited resources, each act compounds, creating waves that extend far beyond the immediate moment. Mercy in this context is not passive. It requires courage, intention, and sometimes sacrifice. Consider humanitarian workers in conflict zones such as Syria or Yemen. Despite personal risk, they feed the hungry, shelter the displaced, and provide medical care to the sick. Each act is an extension of centuries-old Islamic principles, echoing the legacy of the Prophet Muhammad and the scholars and saints who came before. These small yet significant interventions save lives, preserve dignity, and shape destinies that might otherwise be lost to war and neglect. Education remains another domain where mercy shapes destiny. Islamic schools and community centers worldwide foster ethical and moral development alongside academic knowledge. Children are taught that every decision matters, that honesty, patience, and compassion have consequences beyond the immediate context. The discipline instilled through daily prayers, community service, and reflection trains the next generation to navigate moral challenges effectively, influencing the course of communities and, by extension, history itself. Modern technology has amplified the reach of mercy. Online platforms allow Muslims to provide guidance, education, and support to people in regions where practicing faith openly may be dangerous. A single online lesson or charitable initiative can change the trajectory of lives across continents.
Mentoring a colleague, aiding a struggling neighbor, or volunteering time and resources, they actively reshape not only their own destinies, but also the social fabric around them. Their choices ripple outward, impacting families, communities, and sometimes even policy, echoing the timeless Islamic principle that individual moral actions collectively shape history. In healthcare, Muslim doctors and nurses routinely embody mercy in tangible ways. In conflict zones, refugee camps, and underserved urban neighborhoods, their decisions to treat without prejudice, to comfort without judgment, to educate patients and families directly influence survival, quality of life, and future opportunities.
These acts, though often unnoticed by the wider world, exemplify how personal mercy drives societal destiny. Similarly, educators worldwide demonstrate mercy by investing in the potential of children marginalized by poverty, war, or social bias. Every student guided, every lesson delivered with patience and understanding, every mistake approached with correction rather than condemnation contributes to a new trajectory for countless young lives. Over decades, such consistent acts accumulate into lasting societal change, proving that destiny is shaped less by material power than by ethical action. Even the digital realm has become a new frontier where mercy shapes destiny. Online Islamic education, social support groups, and humanitarian fundraising campaigns enable acts of compassion to transcend borders, reaching vulnerable individuals who might otherwise be forgotten. A single online initiative can feed thousands, educate children, or provide medical relief, transforming destinies on an unprecedented scale while embodying the principle that mercy must be intentional and consistent to be effective. Historical parallels abound, from the early Muslim scholars preserving knowledge under threat to Sufi leaders establishing compassionate communities to everyday believers acting ethically under societal pressure. The principle is unchanged. Mercy sustains civilizations, nurtures individuals, and redirects the course of history. Modern examples, from mentorship programs in Detroit to humanitarian aid in Syria, demonstrate that the same moral forces continue to operate today. On a personal level, mercy is transformative. Individuals who face adversity, whether trauma, addiction, or systemic discrimination, find that compassion, both received and extended, reshapes their character and future. A young adult who forgives a personal betrayal, a parent who acts patiently despite stress, a community leader who mediates conflict without bias, all are engaging directly with destiny, creating outcomes that reverberate far beyond their immediate circumstances. The Quran emphasizes that every act, no matter how small, is observed and significant. Islam teaches that intention is as critical as action, that mercy exercised sincerely, even in obscurity, has a cumulative effect on history. Through centuries of trials, migrations, conflicts, and cultural change, this principle has endured, demonstrating that destiny is co-authored by human moral effort and divine guidance. Empires rise and fall, leaders come and go, societies are reshaped, yet the consistent factor remains. Mercy, applied intentionally and courageously, sustains.
Compromise. Each individual story is a testament to the timeless interplay of mercy and destiny. Islamic history repeatedly illustrates that acts of mercy, whether in governance, education, or personal conduct, shape societal destiny more profoundly than conquest or wealth. When rulers exercised justice and compassion, societies flourished. When cruelty and oppression prevailed, civilizations crumbled. The invisible principle behind this historical pattern is consistent. Mercy is the instrument through which God aligns human action with purpose. Even in technological and globalized modernity, this pattern holds true. Online communities provide moral guidance and practical support, extending the reach of mercy beyond geographic boundaries. Educational programs, charitable networks, and mentorship initiatives allow acts of kindness to cascade, influencing countless lives in ways impossible to quantify. The digital age magnifies the principle that intentional, ethical action, grounded in compassion, shapes destinies far beyond the immediate context. The story of Umar ibn Said, enslaved in America, illustrates a timeless theme. Even under extreme adversity, maintaining mercy and dignity preserves one's influence across generations. Modern parallels abound. Refugees teaching their children amidst trauma,
prisoners guiding one another toward reform, individuals quietly transforming communities through ethical leadership. Each act, however unseen, contributes to the ongoing shaping of destiny. Mercy, when consistently applied, produces resilience, sustains civilizations, and reorients personal and collective futures. It ensures that even in chaos, human agency aligned with ethical principles can redirect outcomes. History, therefore, is not simply a record of events. It is the cumulative expression of countless acts of mercy, shaping destinies in visible and unseen ways. Islam teaches that destiny is a living process, co-created through intention, action, and moral discipline. Each moment provides the opportunity to shape outcomes, a choice to forgive, a decision to serve, a refusal to harm. Over time, these choices accumulate, altering the trajectories of families, communities, and nations. Mercy is the thread weaving this tapestry, ensuring that even in the darkest moments, human action aligns with divine guidance. The narrative continues, and it is ongoing. Every act of patience, compassion, and integrity contributes to the unfolding of history in alignment with justice. Mercy, consistently exercised, ensures that destiny is neither blind nor arbitrary, but guided by principles that have endured across centuries. And so the story of Islam, its people, and its enduring legacy persists, a testament to the power of mercy to shape destiny, a moral compass guiding individuals and communities, and a living history that continues to unfold through acts of courage, compassion, and faith. As we delve even deeper into modern life, the intersection of mercy and destiny becomes increasingly evident in the choices of ordinary people navigating extraordinary challenges. Take, for instance, the lives of young Muslim professionals in global cities. They face environments that often reward competition over compassion, expediency over ethics. Yet by intentionally practicing mercy, whether
Increasingly interconnected world, the lesson is urgent. Technology, globalization, and political complexity amplify the consequences of human action. The moral responsibility to exercise mercy and ethical judgment has never been greater. Islam's principles provide a framework for navigating these challenges, demonstrating that even in the most chaotic environments, destiny can be steered through deliberate, compassionate action. And so, the story of mercy and destiny continues, unfolding in every city, village, and home, in every classroom, mosque, and hospital. It manifests in quiet decisions and public deeds alike. It is lived by the ordinary and extraordinary, shaping history in ways both visible and unseen. History is ongoing, destiny is still being written, and mercy remains the force that ensures this unfolding aligns with justice, compassion, and divine purpose. As we journey further into the modern age, the story of mercy and destiny becomes even more intimate, for it is lived most vividly in the choices of individuals who confront moral dilemmas daily. Consider the immigrant families scattered across the globe. Many left homes of comfort and familiarity, fleeing persecution, war, or economic collapse. In their new environments, often indifferent or even hostile, they were challenged not only to survive, but to preserve their values, their faith, and their sense of humanity. Each decision to respond to hostility with patience, to nurture children despite hardship, and to engage neighbors with respect and honesty becomes a microcosm of destiny in action. Mercy, in these circumstances, is the tool through which entire familial trajectories are reshaped. In the context of education, Muslim teachers continue to wield extraordinary influence by exemplifying mercy. When a student misbehaves, punishment alone achieves temporary control. Mercy, paired with guidance, transforms the student's character. When mentors spend hours guiding at-risk youth in cities like Chicago, Detroit, or Los Angeles, they redirect not only individual destinies, but the moral trajectories of entire communities. Each small act of understanding, patience, and encouragement compounds over time into far-reaching consequences. Mercy also manifests in global humanitarian efforts, where Muslims lead initiatives to address famine, conflict, and disaster relief. During the Syrian refugee crisis, countless families were saved not by government action alone, but by communities who organized food, shelter, and medical assistance. Every child fed, every family sheltered, every injury treated represents mercy reshaping the course of lives and, in aggregate, the course of history. The enduring principle remains that mercy is not passive. It requires courage, intentionality, and sometimes personal sacrifice. Islamic teachings reinforce that God measures both intention and action. Even when outcomes appear insignificant, sincere efforts to act justly and compassionately accumulate, influencing destiny in ways that may only become visible generations later. Consider the quiet transformations in personal lives, the prisoner who discovers faith and begins mentoring others behind bars, the woman who forgives a lifetime of abuse and transforms her family dynamics, the young adult who chooses ethical career paths despite pressure to conform.
Empathy. They learn that every ethical decision, no matter how small, contributes to the moral fabric of society. A student who chooses honesty in an exam, compassion in a conflict, or service in a moment of convenience is engaging directly with destiny, shaping their own future and influencing the world around them. In global crises, Muslim communities often lead initiatives that prioritize the vulnerable. During natural disasters, wars, or epidemics, relief efforts are organized with meticulous attention to fairness and dignity, reflecting centuries-old teachings that mercy must guide action. By protecting the weak, feeding the hungry, and sheltering the displaced, these communities demonstrate that destiny is not only shaped by power or circumstance, but by deliberate, compassionate choice. Even in secular contexts, the moral framework inspired by Islamic teachings has profound effects. Individuals practicing mercy in daily life, be it in professional ethics, civic engagement, or interpersonal relationships, create a cascading effect. These seemingly minor interventions collectively redirect the trajectory of communities, sometimes entire cities, over decades. History demonstrates that societies built on such principles endure, while those that disregard them collapse under the weight of injustice, corruption, and cruelty. Mercy and destiny intersect most profoundly in personal transformation. Across the world, individuals facing trauma, addiction, or systemic oppression find resilience through faith. Islam provides tools for structured reflection, ethical action, and patient endurance. Daily prayers, fasting, charitable giving, and community involvement cultivate a disciplined moral life. These practices train individuals to respond to adversity with patience, compassion, and integrity, redirecting personal destinies toward purpose and meaning. The story of Omar ibn Said, enslaved in the United States, exemplifies this enduring principle. Despite immense suffering and the stripping away of freedom, he preserved faith and knowledge, teaching future generations that mercy and dignity can coexist even in captivity. In modern times, countless similar stories unfold, prisoners finding redemption, immigrants rebuilding lives, and youth overcoming adversity through the guidance of Islamic ethics. Each act of mercy preserves the moral thread that continues to shape destiny. Even at the societal level, the same patterns emerge. Communities that practice mercy through equitable governance, support for the vulnerable, and adherence to justice thrive over time. Conversely, societies that abandon compassion, regardless of wealth or military strength, eventually face decline. History consistently demonstrates that mercy is not merely virtuous, it is strategic. It aligns human action with divine principles, stabilizing societies and redirecting collective destiny. Islamic history and contemporary practice teach a profound truth. Destiny is not fixed by circumstance alone. It is co-created through intention, action, and moral discipline. Mercy functions as both the guide and measure of this process. Every act of compassion, whether public or private, contributes to shaping futures, not only for the individual, but for countless others whose lives intersect through unseen networks of influence.